In June 2026, more than 3,000 Malawians, including hundreds of children, slept in an open field in Durban, South Africa, through winter nights. They were not homeless. They had homes. They left them because they were afraid. Anti-immigrant vigilante groups had issued a deadline. June 30th. All undocumented foreign nationals must leave South Africa. The groups had no legal authority to enforce this, but they had already attacked foreign-owned businesses, chased families from their neighborhoods, and killed at least 5 Mozambicans in Mossel Bay. Nigeria flew out 269 of its nationals on emergency evacuation flights. Then more flights. Ghana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Malawi all launched their own repatriation operations. South African authorities reported that approximately 25,000 undocumented migrants had already been deported. Thousands more were still waiting in temporary camps. African ambassadors boycotted South African national celebrations in protest. Ghana formally asked the African Union to investigate. The slogan circulating online in West Africa, coined in direct reference to the 1983 Nigerian mass expulsion, was blunt. South Africa must go. What is happening in South Africa right now is not simply a law enforcement crisis or a migration policy debate. It is a question that every African watching these images is asking. Has South Africa forgotten where it came from? In 1972, Idi Amin stood before Uganda and announced what he called an economic war. Uganda's Asian community, roughly 80,000 people of South Asian descent, owned prominent retail shops, manufacturing businesses, and banks. They made up less than 1% of the population, but controlled a significant portion of the economy. Amin gave them 90 days to leave. He said he was returning Uganda's economy to its rightful indigenous owners. The crowds cheered. The expulsion was popular. The Asian community packed what they could carry and left. Then the shops closed. The factories stopped. The shelves emptied. The businesses that the expelled community had built and run were handed to Amin's military officers and political allies, most of whom had no experience running them. Within months, Uganda's economy was in free fall. The foreign exchange reserves collapsed. Basic goods became scarce. The country that had expelled its economic backbone was now living with the consequences of that decision. It took Uganda 2 decades to recover. Amin's economic war did not make Uganda richer. It made Uganda poorer. And it did so immediately, visibly, and in ways that every Ugandan felt in their daily lives. But Uganda was not the only African country to learn this lesson the hard way. In January 1983, Nigeria's government issued an executive order. All undocumented foreign nationals had 2 weeks to leave the country. Over 2 million people, the majority of them Ghanaian, packed their belongings into large woven bags and left. Those bags became iconic. They were everywhere. Colorful, sturdy, overstuffed bags carried by families who had built their lives in Nigeria and were now leaving everything behind. The bags became so associated with that moment that they were given a name. Ghana Must Go Bags, a name that has lasted 40 years and spread across the world. The logic behind the expulsion was familiar. Nigeria's oil boom had ended. The economy was struggling, unemployment was rising, and foreign workers, mostly Ghanaians filling roles in construction, retail, and domestic service, became the convenient explanation for why ordinary Nigerians were suffering. Politicians facing elections needed someone to blame. The migrants were there. The expulsion order was popular. 2 million people were gone within 2 weeks. What followed was not prosperity. The labor vacuum those workers left created its own economic damage. The construction sector slowed. Retail prices rose. The problems Nigeria had blamed on foreign workers did not disappear when the workers did, because foreign workers were never the cause of those problems. They were the scapegoat for them. Now look at what is happening in 2026. South Africa is expelling Nigerians and Ghanaians, the descendants of the same communities Nigeria expelled in 1983. And the phrase circulating across West African social media in response is not complicated. South Africa must go. History does not repeat exactly, but sometimes it rhymes so closely it is uncomfortable. And the voices making this argument are not only coming from outside South Africa. On South African social media in the days after the June 30th deadline, one commenter wrote something that captured the historical irony with uncomfortable precision. Ghana must go version 2. For context, Nigeria did this to the Ghanaians, kicked them all out, then refused to do the low-caliber work they were doing. It's going to be much the same here. A South African, writing on a South African forum, warning South Africans that they are about to repeat the exact mistake Nigeria made in 1983. And underneath that rhyme is a detail that makes this specific moment more painful than any other African mass expulsion in recent memory. Before we go further, the frustration driving this movement deserves an honest hearing. South Africa has the highest unemployment rate in the world, 32.7%. That is not a statistic. That is millions of people who wake up every morning with no work, no income, and no clear path forward. When people in that position look around and see foreign nationals running businesses in their communities, the anger that follows is not irrational. It is human. Every country has both the right and the obligation to control its borders and enforce its immigration laws. Nobody serious is arguing otherwise. The question is not whether South Africa should have immigration enforcement. It does, and it should. The question is whether what is happening right now, vigilante ultimatums, mob violence, families sleeping in open fields, is immigration enforcement at all, or whether it is something else wearing immigration enforcement as a disguise. Because Uganda also believed it was reclaiming its economy, Nigeria also believed it was protecting its workers. Both were wrong about what would follow. In 1976, Nigeria created something called the Southern Africa Relief Fund. The fund had one purpose: to support the people of South Africa in their struggle against apartheid. Ordinary Nigerians contributed to it voluntarily: civil servants, students, market traders. Nigerian families gave what they could. The contributions became so widespread, so embedded in Nigerian public life, that people gave the fund a nickname: the Mandela Tax. Within 6 months, the fund had raised $10.5 million. The Nigerian government under General Olusegun Obasanjo contributed $3.7 million directly. His entire cabinet made personal donations. Nigerian students skipped lunch at school to put money into the fund. Workers contributed 2% of their income. This was not a government program people were forced into. It was a genuine expression of African solidarity from people who had never met a South African, but believed that injustice anywhere on African soil was their problem too. But it went further than money. When the apartheid government confiscated the passports of ANC members, making it impossible for them to travel internationally and continue their diplomatic work, Nigeria issued them Nigerian passports. Over 300 Nigerian passports were given to South African freedom fighters. Thabo Mbeki, who would later become South Africa's president, lived in Nigeria for 7 years. Nigeria became a sanctuary, a place where South Africans who could not go home were welcomed, housed, educated, and given the documents they needed to keep fighting for their country's freedom. By the time apartheid ended in 1994, Nigeria had spent an estimated $61 billion supporting the liberation struggle in southern Africa. More than any other country in the world, the people now being loaded onto evacuation flights out of South Africa are the children and grandchildren of the people who paid that Mandela tax. And the country loading them onto those flights is the one their parents helped free. The argument behind South Africa's anti-migrant movement is straightforward. Unemployment in South Africa is officially at 32.7%, the highest in the world. Foreign nationals, the argument goes, are taking jobs that should go to South Africans. It is a simple argument. It is also, according to economists and migration researchers, the wrong one. Foreign nationals make up approximately 4 to 5% of South Africa's population. The claim that this group is responsible for unemployment at 32.7% among a population 20 times its size does not hold up to basic mathematical scrutiny. Migrants did not cause South Africa's energy crisis. They did not cause its infrastructure failures, its corruption, its stagnant growth, or its structural inequality problems that predate the current wave of migration by decades. One South African commentator did the maths publicly in the days after the protests. He calculated that even if every single migrant who had left South Africa had been employed, and every single one of those jobs was immediately filled by a South African, which itself is an optimistic assumption, the national unemployment rate would drop by approximately 0.2%. Not 10%, not 5%, 0.2%. South Africa's unemployment crisis was not caused by migrants, and it will not be solved by removing them. What migrants do in South Africa, as they do in every economy that hosts them, is fill gaps. They work in informal sectors, run small businesses, provide services in communities where formal employment does not reach. Many of the foreign-owned tuck shops that have been looted and burned were serving communities where no South African business was willing to operate. Look at what happened in Uganda when Amin expelled the Asian community. The shops they ran did not fill with South African-owned businesses. They closed. The economy contracted. The people who had cheered the expulsion soon found themselves living in a country that could no longer supply basic goods. Look at Nigeria in 1983. The workers expelled did not get replaced by Nigerian workers. The labor market absorbed their departure through higher prices, slower construction, and reduced economic activity. South Africa's economic problems are real and serious, but they will not be solved by expelling the 4% of the population who did not create them. They will be worsened by it. The question is not whether South Africa has the right to enforce its immigration laws. It does. Every country does. The question is whether the current movement built on vigilante ultimatums, mob violence, and political scapegoating is about immigration law at all, or whether it is about something else entirely. Are South Africans becoming their own enemies? The honest answer is that South Africa is a country in genuine pain. Unemployment at 32.7% is not an abstraction. It is millions of people without income, without dignity, without a clear path forward. South Africa was freed because the continent refused to look away. Nigeria paid a Mandela Tax. Ghana gave refuge to ANC leaders. Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and country after country made sacrifices for a South Africa they believed in. The South Africa they believed in was not this one. What happens next matters, not just for the families on those evacuation flights, but for the idea of African solidarity itself. If the country that benefited most from continental unity turns on the continent, what does that say about whether unity was ever real? The continental response is already visible in real time. All over the internet, people in Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, ordinary Africans are asking the same question out loud. What if all countries chase them away just like they're doing to others? We all need one another. South Africans should know that their relatives are living and doing businesses in different parts of the world. Ramaphosa should not step his foot in any of our African countries. These are not the reactions of governments issuing diplomatic statements. These are ordinary Africans in Kampala, Lagos, Accra, Nairobi, telling you in plain language that the goodwill South Africa accumulated across 4 decades of liberation, solidarity is being spent, rapidly, and it may not be easily restored. And what does the rest of Africa do now? Drop a comment. Are you South African? Are you from one of the countries whose citizens are being evacuated? And do you think South Africa is heading toward the same outcome as Uganda and Nigeria? Or is this situation genuinely different? Subscribe for more videos like this. See you in the next one.